Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to another weekly reading wrap-up. We have 10 more books to talk about this week. That's really been my pace lately, I guess, is 10 books a week, and I'll take it. It is not bad at all. I apologize for the lighting today. It is the rainy season now, which I'm totally happy with, like no bitching at all to do with that. The only problem for me is it makes filming difficult. Like either I have too much light and it just fucks with it, or we have too little. But I know it doesn't matter. You guys are here to hear about the books. It doesn't matter if you can see my face perfectly or not. It's good to go. Hold on, I gotta remove that because that'll bug me being behind my head. Before we get in, we do have some new patrons and channel members to welcome. Thank you guys for being so generous. I love it. So we have 2 new channel members. We have Daniela James and Child of the King. Thank you both so much for choosing to support me on my channel memberships. That is awesome. And then we have 3 new patrons, which is awesome. We have Mal, DJ, and Katie. So thank you all for supporting me. Your names will be in the credits at the end, and make sure you are taking advantage of all your benefits that you have. I can't wait to do that. Right before this, the reason that one is up there is I was just filming my exclusive review for the month, so that's awesome. Okay, now let's get into the books. There's the FedEx truck roving by. I don't think he has anything for me, but we'll see if I get a buzz or not. Let me open up my computer because, you know, I need my notes here. All right. This week was a fun one. I got through a lot of audiobooks, which was really cool. And I got through a lot of my patron books this month because I had a lot of Patreon books that were ones I haven't read before, which is cool. I like when that happens. So the first book that I read, though, was actually a reread through audio. So on Easter Sunday, I went to the early service at church, which was awesome. I was home by 10:30, which is crazy. That's usually when I'm heading to church. And I just didn't know what I wanted to read. I was just kind of all over the place. I couldn't decide what to do. And so 4 days just like that, I actually have a bunch of audiobooks saved up of my favorite books that I haven't listened to the audio before. And one of those that I decided to do was Sweet Like Poison. So yep, I've read this one 3 or 4 times at this point, but I hadn't listened to the audio yet. So this, of course, is Elena and Lachlan. This was one of my 6-star reads from last year. I absolutely adored it. I love this couple so much. This is a new adult story. It takes place at a college in Savage River, California. And this is a kind of a farm boy who's in the city. He's just there to get his degree, and then he's going to be heading back to his family to help. So he's not planning to make any attachments. And he happens to be living next door to Elena, who is just this, she is a firecracker. She is wild and crazy and fun, and we love her so much. And Locke, he makes some judgments about her that are not cool. But then they end up having kind of this weekend night stands while their friends are away, because she lives with her friends and he lives with his friends. That's how college goes. And when they're back, he's kind of like, we need to stop hooking up. And this hits Elena harder than she expects it to, mostly because Locke has been able to give her pleasure in a way she's never been able to have before. Like, for realsies. She has never experienced the kind of pleasure that she's had with him. And so she's a little bit like, okay, you're breaking up with me. It's fine. It's not like I've had the best sex of my life with this guy who doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. Like, okay. But he does still want something to do with her. And we watch Locke kind of stumble around a little bit in this. Like, he definitely makes multiple mistakes with Elena. But I feel like he grovels so good. And he is such a genuinely good guy. He just steps on his own dick a few times. Like, that's the nicest thing to say. But this book just wins me over so much. It has my heart so much. Savage University. And I'm also very excited for the next series that J. Wolf is setting in Savage River, which is going to be Savage Academy. So I can't wait. But this is a 6-star read. It's a 4 on the spice scale. It's so beautiful. It does have trigger warnings of miscarriage by other people in the story, as well as previous SA and an abusive relationship. So be aware of those triggers. Then, because I was in the audiobook mood, I just went with it and I read one of the books that was on my TBR, which was Consider Me by Becca Mack. This one I had an audiobook for, so I dived right into it. This book was recommended to me by my friend Jo from Not So Average Jo. Make sure you check out her channel. I'll have her listed down below. Plus, I've had a few other people mention it as well. It gets mentioned in concert with the Liz Tom Ford books, and I understand it's a sports book. It's also a reformed playboy. It's also like the hero really works for the heroine in this book. Like, he works so hard to get past his reputation and to convince this girl to go out with him. So there's definitely some things between Mile High and this one. And I had a wonderful time with it. My biggest issues are twofold. One, we kept hitting on the same issues over and over and over again. And it just was very tiring by the time it was the third act conflict of it, because it's like we've already hit upon these issues so many times that I wanted them to act differently when we got to that point. You know, it happens. Also, it was too long. Like, this book is 450 pages, which isn't the longest that's ever existed. But there is a very good chunk of this book where they're just together and happy, which normally would give me so much joy for them to be together and be happy. But it's for so much of the book that it's kind of like, okay, we get it. You're happy. When is something bad going to happen? And then repeat what I said, like issues that we've had before show up, and we have this rushed third act conflict like right at the end, and then we're hunky-dory again. But if you are someone who wants to read them just being mushy and happy together, and I mean, their sexy times are really great, and these two become obsessed. If we want to talk about a Labrador Retriever hero, like, or Golden Retriever hero, it is Carter, okay? Carter, is it Carter Beckett? Is his name Carter Beckett? Yes, I got it. Carter Beckett is definitely that. It was just almost nauseating at some points, okay? And like, I don't say that like as a horrible thing. This was fun. There'll still be reasons for me to recommend this book at different times, but it was just too much of it. It easily could have been 100 pages less, and I still would have got everything I got out of it, and I might have rated it higher if it was 100 page less than this. So I gave this a 4-star. It was a 3.5 on the spice scale. This does deal with issues of like death of a parent, and some other stuff to go with that. But I really loved the friend group. I really loved the families of these people. And so I definitely will read the next one, which is going to be about this hero's sister and one of the teammates. Like, I'm into it. I'll read more. The audiobook was very pleasant. It was a good time. It just was too long. It was too long. Needed to be shorter. All right, then I read Between Hello and Goodbye by Emma Scott. This one is for a patron as well. They asked me to read this book. Now, I haven't read any Emma Scott. I couldn't remember if I'd read one or not, but this was one that I know, I think this just came out last year. Yeah, this one was just out last year. I heard really good things about it. I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about Emma Scott. I've just also heard she is very emotional and things like that, and that always makes me a little bit nervous. And especially reading the author's note at the end of this one and knowing that parts of this book, particularly the grief and like the trauma of losing someone very suddenly, are very like true to the author's life, I can understand it. This was a really beautiful story. It starts with like, it's a vacation for the heroine. She's in kind of this crossroads in her career, and she decides to go on a Hawaiian vacation for 2 weeks to help her kind of decide what steps she wants to take next. And on her second day there, she goes on this hike and she gets in an accident. And this one is also true to life. I love the author even has like pictures in the back of when this happened to her. And they needed to call in the firefighters and the first responders to help get her down from the mountain. And she had to be helicoptered out of there. And that's what happens to our heroine, is she's so embarrassed. But there's a hunky first responder, and, you know, he makes sure she gets to the hospital. And then he realizes she's literally there alone. She doesn't have anyone else who's there with her. And she's just having a really tough time. Like, physically, being able to get around. She's on crutches, never used those. Has a horrible sprain. It's not a break, but it's almost, you know, it's one of those where, like, it's almost worse than that because it hurts so bad. And he's a grumpy firefighter. He doesn't like to mess around with tourists or, like, get in the way with any of that. But he just feels really drawn to her. And funny enough, what is she doing? She's taking a man date, or a break from men while she's on this vacation, but that can only last so long. So these two kind of have this, like, they just fall hard and deep. She meets his family. His family is the sweetest. He has a younger brother, a sister-in-law, and a nephew. And he has his reasons for why he moved to Hawaii and kind of the life that he'd run away from to live on the islands too. And so, yeah, it was just very interesting between them. And then, you know, the conflict is twofold. Number one, you know, what are they going to do at the end of this 2 weeks that she's there? She's going to have to go back. And what will that mean for them? Like, was this love that they built, you know, that they are building during this 2 weeks, is that enough to make changes in their life for each other or not? And then, as I said, there's a traumatic loss of life that happens at some point in this book that then, you know, again, the fragile life that they're building, it kind of blows all of that up as well. So definitely this has some emotional 1-2 punch, all of it in under 300 pages. And I thought it was very beautifully written. I feel like Emma Scott didn't kind of like waste her words, you know, for an author that I'm told is very emotional. For her to fit this into the size of a book that she did, I thought was really great. It just was also one of those that it was extremely predictable, and the way that the hero acted, even in his grief, was just extremely frustrating to see. And then we were kind of like rushed with the conciliatory situation at the end. I was like, it's going a little too quick for me. But I still had a wonderful time with this book, and I'm glad I read it. And I would read another Emma Scott after reading this. So I'm very glad my patron picked this one. I gave this one 4 stars. It was a 2.5 on the spice scale. And of course, as I said, death of loved ones happens in here. Then I read an arc of a book that is definitely already out. Like, the arcs for it only became available when the book was like already out. So it isn't my fault that I took a while to get to it. But Scarlett Sinclair kind of had a surprise release. She released this fairy tale retelling called Mountains Made of Glass. Now, could I tell you completely what the retellings are? No. They're based on some Hans Christian Andersen and a Grimm fairy tale, which she has a note at the end that tells you what they are, but it is a retelling of a mix of a few things. And she's going to do a whole series of these novellas that are about each of these Fae brothers. And this particularly, we have a heroine who she ends up killing a frog, which is one of these Fae princes, and as punishment, the other Fae brothers make her stay with their brother the Beast, and she must discover what his true name is and speak his true name. There's also the secret that she has to be in love with him when she does it. Someone who loves him has to speak his true name to release him from his curse. And so it has some Beauty and the Beast vibes in there as well. But honestly, this was a confusing mess for me. It really, really was. Part of it is that she kind of writes it in that old kind of fairy tale style where it's still in first-person POVs for both the Beast and the heroine. Her name is Giselle. But then it's also written in like this fairy tale style that just made it very hard to like connect with the characters. And the Beast, the hero, he's written very much like a prickly fairy tale hero, and like I didn't have any sympathy or like love for him at all. And when things are getting sexual between them so soon with kind of some like dubious consent scenarios, I just am like, why are you doing this? Is kind of what I was feeling. So I was really interested in the concept. There was also there was illustrations throughout, which was kind of cool too. I love a fairy tale with illustrations. But it was interesting. It was interesting. So yeah, there was a lot with this. So yeah. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I rounded it up to 4 because I had an arc of it, and y'all know how I feel about it. So it was a 3.5 for me. It was a 2.5 on the spice scale. It did have some choking kink for the kinkiness, but it also had trigger warnings for death, violence, attempted essay, dubious consent, and maiming. And then yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, but I mean, it was pretty good. I was glad that I got it for free since I read it for NetGalley. So there we go. All right. Then I read No Rest for the Wicked by Lauren Smith. I was so excited to read this. This was a pirate romance. This Lauren Smith is also known as Emma, I always forget her name, from Love in the Wild. Emma, it's not Emma Chase. I always want to say Emma Chase, but that's her other name. The woman who wrote Love in the Wild, she also has a pen name that's Lauren Smith that has contemporary and historicals. And I've read one of her historicals before. It was just okay, but I've been wanting to try more. And this one was excellent. This one was on Anyplay. It has a different cover to it when you look for it, but it's called No Rest for the Wicked. It's book 1 in the Pirates of King's Landing series. And I really read this one because the next one is called In Like Flynn, and I really wanted to read that one. But I'm glad I read this one first because In Like Flynn definitely gets fed. And this one has our heroine, Roberta Bobby Harcourt, and she ends up trapped on a ship with pirates after she's separated from her father when their ship is attacked. So Robbie finds herself the unwilling guest of the sinfully handsome Captain Dominic Gray, and he gives her 2 choices: to share his bed and maintain her life as a lady, or she can sleep on the floor of his cabin and live the life of a cabin boy until he decides to set her free. Refusing to be seduced by a pirate, she dresses in breeches and assumes the duties on board the ship among his men. But each night she's staying in his cabin and sleeping on the floor. It's kind of funny because he doesn't demand that she sleep on the floor. She's like, I'm not going to sleep in bed with you. I'm going to sleep on the floor. So he doesn't tell her she has to sleep on the floor. She's like, you can sleep on the floor. I'm going to sleep on the bed. And he's like, no, I'm the captain. I'm sleeping in my bed. You can sleep with me or you can sleep on the floor. And she sleeps on the floor. She was so sassy. She knows a lot about being on a ship because her father, he is some kind of like diplomat for the crown, and he's always brought her with her because he never wanted to leave her at home. He is now trying to find her a husband, and she's really worried about that. Not so much because she's worried about like being married, but she knows that no husband is going to bring her along with her. Like, even if her father finds another Navy man to marry her to, he will want to leave her at home. And she's like, I love the life on sea too much to be left at home. So being on a pirate ship actually fits her quite well. And I just loved how her and Dom were falling for each other, and their sexual tension is amazing. And there is actually a bit bigger, badder, more evil pirate because, of course, Dominic, he's an anti-hero. He does his pirating, but he also helps a lot of people because some of the backstory of Dom is that he was forced into piracy as a young man. And he was taken from his family. And so, while he doesn't feel like he can go back to his family because he's been living as a pirate for so long, he does want to keep others from being treated the way that he's treated. So there is a really nasty pirate out there who wants to ruin him. And when he sees that he has his eyes on Robbie, he's like, this is my chance for revenge against pirate Dominic Gray. So this was fun. It had swashbuckling good times. It had naval battles and adventure and just so much fun. Like, it was so clever. It was a bit edgy. Like, there are a few like dark things that are referenced in this. Some of the trigger warnings for this do include the fact that there was mentions of previous SA that happened to Dom. Like, he was very much abused by the pirate who had him before. And there's attempted SA of Robbie at different times. There's also torture that gets mentioned. So there are a few edgier things that happen in here, but I thought it was well done. It didn't overdo it either. This was a pretty quick read. The audiobook was only like 7.5 hours. Like, it went by fast. I had a great time with it. So highly recommend. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars, and it's a 2.5 on my spice scale, and I can't wait to read In Like Flynn because I know who Flynn is now, and I'm so excited for that one. It's gonna be great. All right, next I read Dirty Wicked Prince. So one of my patrons picked this one for me to read. And so I'm not going to trash this book kind of the way I want to, because I just want to be respectful of that. And my patron who picked this, I love you, girl. I love you so much. And I will say that she told me that one of the later books in the series like is her favorite one, but being me, I was like, well, I'll just start with the first one. And I maybe should have started with the one that she wanted me to, because this one, it was pretty rough. It's one that takes place at a prep school. The heroine and her brother, they don't have either of their parents, and so they now have this guardian who is providing for them. He's provided them with entrance into the Court Legacy Academy or whatever it's called. But they're both very like edgy kids. And the heroine, her name is Sloane. Funnily enough, I just read a prep school romance last week that the heroine's name was Sloane. Sloane was like a thing, like naming your heroine Sloane is like a thing, apparently. Because there's a lot. And she gets up on the wrong foot with people literally the second she steps on campus. The second she steps on campus. And her brother is like, why do you have to do this? Like, why can't we fly under the radar for once? Like, why do you have to get on people's bad side immediately? And I kind of agreed with her brother a lot. There's also some nefarious stuff that's happening with the elite of this, because of course there is. That's how we go. And so we have Dorian Prince with a Z in his name, of course, because he's that pretentious. Windsor Preparatory Academy, that's what it's called. Windsor Preparatory Academy. And yeah, it didn't get better from there for me. It didn't. This was rough. This was painful. I thought both the characters were extremely frustrating. And like there is a subplot that with stuff that happened before our heroine ended up here that she kind of steps in the middle of, and that's why there's like, we need to get rid of her, we don't want her at our school, we're gonna chase her away from our school, which I'm like, who actually thinks they're gonna do that? I don't know. But the whole time this plot was playing out, I was like, you boys don't know everything. You obviously don't know everything, and you're blaming someone for something that they probably have nothing to do with. And what do you know? I was right. And then that person ends up dead. Someone ends up dead at the end of this. Because I knew this one would have a cliffhanger, because I think the first like 3 books by this author are about this same couple. I don't know. So anyway, this was a 2-star book for me. 2.5 on the spice scale, with trigger warnings of dubcon, death of a family member, and a few other things. So that's all we're going to say about it. I'm not going to rant or rave, because this is going to someone's home and I don't want to be a bitch about it, but I read it, so we're moving on. All right, then I read The Arc of Their Broken Legend by Nikki Harris. This is the last book in the Kids of the District series, also the Butcher Boys, whatever you want to call it. This one is Xander. He is the fighter hero. The heroine's name is Kaya. They end up meeting where he immediately goes down on her. That happens. Our heroine actually too, like, is a virgin heroine, but she's had many boys pleasure her. She's just never let any of them go all the way. And also at the start of this book, her father is put in jail for getting himself in trouble with some practices that he shouldn't have been doing, type of scenario. And she needs money. And so kind of before she's really involved with the hero, she signs up to like auction her virginity off. And so then we're just kind of letting that plot stew, because we know that the more she's getting involved with Xander, that she's not going to, number one, not going to be able to sell her virginity at some point because she won't have it anymore. But also Xander isn't just going to let her go fuck somebody else once they've been together. So I love Xander in this. He definitely is a feral sunshine hero. He reminds me a lot of Finn from Hydrus, you know, that just like feral sunshine. And the heroine's supposed to be the grumpy one. I didn't really see her as grumpy. I just saw her more as like, she keeps people at a distance because people want to use her and fuck her, and so she is just kind of like catty and stuff. But it did make her hard to relate to, and I think that if people have complaints about this book, like they might, it may be the heroine. The heroine was definitely more of an issue for me. But this, I also didn't feel like we like wrapped up the family as much as I wanted us to. I don't know. I was expecting a bit more of that. Who knows? But this definitely had lots of good kinky times in this one. This one has some somnophilia. Like, there's a point in it where the hero is like, I never want to do anything you don't want to happen to you. And she's like, I'm giving you a blanket yes for anything you want to do. And that includes him waking her up by fucking her, which we love to see it. There's lots of rough sex in this. The hero also is pierced. He has a Jacob's ladder, so we got some of that goodness coming. Someone will ask, a Jacob's ladder is multiple piercings down the penis. So, just so you know, that's what he has. Ribbed for her pleasure, that's what it is. There also is trigger warnings for SA, talk of previous childhood sexual assault, violence. There's also a head injury side effects. That's a big part of this. Our hero gets injured while doing his sport. which is very traumatic to see. Like, oof, it's traumatic to see. So yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 stars, and it was a 4 on the spice scale for me. And like I said, it ended up feeling kind of chaotic, and I don't feel that it wrapped up the series as well as I wanted it to. But Xander is worth the price of admission. We'll just say that. Like, he was. And their spicy times, as I said, were really great and very emotional as they're like falling in love. I really enjoyed that. All right, then I read Deal with the Devil by Kit Rocha. This one is the exclusive for my Patreons this month, so I won't be going into details about this one at all. I just filmed the review of it before this. That's the one that I said that thing was for. So this one was picked for Found Family. This is a post-apocalyptic story. There are these 2 different crews who have to work together to do a thing. I don't want to spoil anything. And they end up being a found family by the end. I will say that. It was very beautiful. And I will say I gave this one 4 stars, and it was a 2.5 on my spice scale. And I'm going to continue the series. So when I continue the series, I'll talk more in detail about those. But for now, the exclusive review of this will go up on my Patreon on either Monday or Tuesday. I haven't decided yet, but that'll be up for the patrons then. Then I finally read Stray by Daisy Jane. This was the last book by Daisy Jane in this trilogy that I needed to read, the Men of Paradise series, and they each were a different kinky one. So I read these completely out of order. I read the third one first, which is With Force, and that one has rape fantasy in it. Then I read the first one, which is Where Violets Bloom, and that one is a stalker romance, which was the most... I looked back at my review and I said it's the most charming stalker romance I've ever read, and I stand by that. If you want to read a stalker but you don't know how dark you want a book to be, definitely read Where Violets Bloom, because it wasn't dark like at all. But he is a stalker, and he does kind of kidnap her at one point, but it was beautiful. And then this is Stray, and this is a femdom romance, and this had a very unique setup scenario. Our heroine is short on cash, and she finds out from a friend, kind of, that she could make money being a femdom, and it would also help her get some of her power back, because she is a single mom, and she's feeling, you know, she's missing a little something in her life. And so this friend is like, you could become a femdom. And these are what the ads look like, the people who are looking for a femdom to come dominate them. And, well, it turns out that this ad that's supposed to be her femdom is actually a job interview. And she goes into this job interview with our hero, Bran, and totally starts dominating him. And he's so stunned, and he loves it so much that he agrees to a weekly meeting with her where she's going to dominate him. And it takes the first, like, 3 or 4 meetings before it finally comes out that he was just so wowed by her that he not only agreed to see her, but to send her money for it too. Like, he'd been paying an escort to dominate him because he liked it so much. So this was very sweet. She is a single mom. She's a young single mom, and he's a business owner. And I loved watching them fall in love. And I love the exploration. Like, that's something Daisy Jane does really well. Because there is all the great stuff that comes along with a femdom. Like, there's cock cages, there's edging, there's pegging at one point. But once they start, like, a relationship, she also likes to be bossed around sometimes too. And so they have this beautiful give and take between the two of them. And they're really willing to trust each other with anything. And I thought that was beautiful. As it is with Daisy Jane, though, she overwrites the shit out of her books. Okay, I'm sorry to say. This book was over 500 pages. So did not need to be. Okay, they don't even meet each other till 25% into this book. So you got me right. It's over 500 pages. That means there's 110 pages before they even have that first meeting. Oofda. So much. Like, to me, that's a huge detriment, because a lot of people will see a 500 plus page book and be scared by it anyway. And me, like, we didn't need to start that early. And having read 3 books in the series, I'll say that my detractor from each of these, the reason why I've given each of these books 4 stars, is they are so overwritten. I'm just prepared for it now. When I pick up her book, I skim for pages and pages before anything's happening. And for some people, they don't have time for that shit. Some people, you'll be totally fine with you're like, oh, I'm in for it. It's okay. I'll go for it. But I don't got time for you to waste 110 pages before they meet. Like, there are some rules. You get the characters on page together as soon as possible, and you keep them on page together as much as you can, because you will fatigue people very quickly. You will fatigue them very quickly. So I did give it 4 stars. It's a 4 on the spice scale. As I said, it's got all of the good spicy things. There's a trigger warning for early onset dementia of a parent, so be prepared for that. And then the last book that I finished, which I read in one stint yesterday, because I was like, I am not getting behind on this one. I read The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent, and I won't spoil this book for you. So I'll say some of the facts about it. This is book 2 in her Crowns of Nyaxia series. It is also a wrap-up of the duet that is the Nightborn duology, because each duet is like about a couple, and it will like wrap up with that. So we wrapped up this couple, which is probably good, because based on the fact that Carissa is having a baby soon, there won't be more books in this series until next year. So it's good that she wrapped up this duet. There is still stuff that is open, because there are other things that have been set up. There is still a villain who gets away at the end. There's still so much more to explore. We got a lot of answers in this book, and we also have a lot of questions left. But we get Rain's POV in this book. I'll say that. That doesn't feel like a spoiler. We get Rain's POV in this book. Loved being in Rain's POV, by the way. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But yeah, Rain, he has a lot on his plate. Don't want to spoil things for the first book either, but like, Rain has a lot on his plate, and Aurea is pissed at him, so he's trying to get her on his side, as well as deal with his advisors and everything they have to say to him. And he's just trying to hold on for dear life, right? Our poor Rain. I love him so much. But I loved it. He's got some groveling to do. He does it. He does it well, all right? We have a lot more danger we sit through. Like, there's a lot of hard stuff in this one, guys. Like, Carissa doesn't pull her punches. There was death of a parent that gets talked about. There's torture. There is abuse of children in here. It's not like us overtly watching children be abused, but there is a character in here who, you'll see what I mean. Like, I literally don't want to spoil it, but there's a character, a vampire character, who has children around them. And when you see what's happened to these children, it makes you sick. Like, you're just like, oh my God. It's intense. So yeah, there's lots of that in this. So this was a 5-star read for me, and it was a 2.5 on the spice scale, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I want more of Carissa Broadbent, and so I can't wait for The Slaying of the Vampire Conqueror to come out, which does take place in the Nyaxia world. I'm excited to see like how it's connected to them, or like what's going on with it. It's gonna be great. So yeah. But anyway, those are the 10 books that I read this week, which is awesome. Thank you so much for watching this. If you made it all the way to the end, make sure you like this video and get subscribed to my channel. I have some great videos coming out this week, including Dirty Talking Heroes. We also have, what's the other one that I just filmed? Jennifer. Dirty Talking Heroes. Oh, and No Third Act Breakup just came out, and I also have some more that I'm filming today that will be a surprise. So thank you so much for watching, my friends, and I'll see you next time.